Hi everyone, welcome back. Elden Ring is a game I've had conflicted feelings about, so join me as I give it one final playthrough to determine, do I hate Elden Ring? This video is part of a series, so if you haven't seen it yet, you'll want to start with the first part. As a reminder, I'll be using Spirit Summons, but I'll be avoiding Black Knife Tiche and Mimic Tear unless I am truly stuck. I'll also be avoiding commonly considered broken tools like Hoarfrost Stop, Moonveil, and Comet Azure. The goal is to see if I enjoy how the game plays, not if I can make a build to trivialize it. Last time I bounced between the Weeping Peninsula and parts of Limgrave trying to get levels and equipment, while also getting as much of the tutorial stuff out of the way as I could. This time around I'm hitting the rest of Limgrave and then continuing on to Stormveil. With that, let's get back into it. Loading back in next to the Grace by Sellen where I left off last time, I open the map to decide where I want to go next. I still have the starting area in the east of Limgrave to explore. The Wondrous Physique is the last part of my core tools that won't be coming from a boss, and I already have some mixtures for it, so I decide to head east to get it. I don't remember exactly where it is, so I get the map and start setting down some waypoints. This is where the bears that appeared in all the trailers for this game are, and they are absolutely miserable to fight, and I prepare for a slog. These seem pretty chill though, so I decide to live and let live and continue to Fort Height and decide to work backwards from there. I think I'm getting into some bad habits. I ride across the map on Torrent, bypassing anything I might be aggroing. Avoiding the enemies is a valid strategy, but I'm more concerned that it also just ends up being the best way to engage with the content. If I find a fight annoying, then I skip it, but most of the overworld fights are either annoying or weak, and very few of them give anything that would make up for the time spent to take them on. I'd rather just get to the interesting content quicker. When I do get to the fort, I start getting shot at. I forget I had magic for this exact reason and jump up the stairs to deal with the guy shooting at me. This does not go well for me. I get back up to the wall and then locked in place by two knights and a pumpkinhead. I tried dodging and jumping to get out from between them, but it doesn't work. I can't escape, I can't see anything. All I know is I'm dead. The second attempt goes a bit better. Most of the enemies are still aggro to me, so I have to bounce my engagements so that I'm not overwhelmed by everything I'm fighting. The open world is actually helping me here, so I can pull some of them out and then move a bit more to keep from having to fight everything. Eventually, it's just me and the Pumpkinhead left. I don't find this fight as engaging as the one in front of Sellen. The only real change is my equipment, but it's making this fight kind of a drag. I get punished for trying to attack, and I think I just figured out why. I should make it clear that I'm going to be using a few terms brought over from fighting games. Most of you already know these, but just in case, here's some definitions. Committing, or to commit to something, means to take an action that will lock you into that action. This is how most Souls-like combat actually works. When you attack, you're committed to that action until the attack ends, or you're interrupted by your opponent. Usually it's the same for your enemies. A whiff is when you commit to an attack that misses the opponent. Think about when I missed the wolves with the claymore. No, I'm not over it. I committed an attack that was out of range, whiffing the attack. Which brings us to the punish. A punish is when you hit your opponent during their attack. Sometimes this is divided into counters and punishes. Counters landing during the start of their attacks, and punishes landing during the recovery. But I'm just going to refer to both as a punish for now. The quick hit the Pumpkinhead does with his offhand is a classic example of a punish for over-aggressive or greedy play. The reason I bring this up is to make it clear I'm not complaining about the punish. That's just one of the many ways games can tell you to change your behavior in the game itself. The problem is why I'm being punished. If I whiff an attack or overt commit, then I should be punished, but that means I need to be able to identify clear openings when a boss attacks. When I block, there is some ending lag before I can input a new command. Normally, I would dodge to get distance, but I get caught mid-roll because of a combination of the lag and input queuing. The end lag is a punishment for turtling too much behind the shield, but the game already punishes that with how much stamina is being used. I don't know why you would have both unless you were trying to punish shield use entirely. A lot of complaining here about a very short fight, but it gives me concerns going forward. For now, I just commit to also upgrading the shield and seeing if the additional guard boost will help at all with this. The fort itself isn't too bad. The enemies help me out a bit by just kind of exploding at the start. Thanks. The fort's pretty small and filled with explosive barrels. And rats. There's still an enemy chucking firebombs from above, so I run to take him out, and immediately have to sprint towards another one doing the same thing. Which brings me right to the boss. The Blood Knight has an attack that pierces my shield and causes blood loss. I back off to try to heal and find I'm being surrounded by rats. I run down the stairs to give me some breathing room, and summon the wolves to keep me from being overwhelmed. And the knight helpfully falls off the stairs, letting me help them clear out the rats. I get a heavy attack from a story high and take the knight out without too much trouble. Good thing too, because I was getting way too hair trigger on the dodge. A well-timed blood attack probably would have ended me. I pass by an NPC on the way to the Third Church of America and decide to talk to him since I believe he's one of a couple that doesn't have a tragic end. He tells me to clear out the fort I just came from. I glare at him until he gives me a dagger and I continue on my way. I'm probably never seeing him again. At the church, I'm able to pick up the Flask of Wondrous Physic, giving me a new tool to help with the game world. Although I always end up falling back on the negate damage and recover health mixture. It's just too useful to be able to take those extra hits, even more so when the bosses can attack before the camera can move through the fog walls. I sit at the Grace and it gives me an opportunity to talk to Melina. She mostly acts as a lore dump for the world in these churches. There are some hints of characterization as someone who knows she's filling in a duty for someone as a pseudo-maiden, and isn't fully confident in fulfilling that role, but it never really comes back around to a full character arc. I still appreciate the more direct approach to lore. I just wish we could flesh out the story I'm currently in a bit more. I wander around a bit and find the Gale Tunnel. When I get to the Grace, I decide to put on an Ash of War. None are really appealing to me right now, but I go with Storm Stomp to increase the scaling on my longsword a bit. Going into the tunnel and... Oh, hi Alexander. I've never seen him in a place like this. One of the great things about Elden Ring is that there's always something new to see. Unfortunately, that clashes with one of my biggest complaints, which is how easy it is to miss significant parts of these characters' stories. Anyway, Alexander tells me a bit about himself, and about this tunnel which leads to Caelid. I talk to him until he starts repeating himself, as is standard for From games, and then try to explore the rest of the tunnel. I don't get very far because the door does not open from this side. So I leave. I didn't want to head to Caelid anyway, so I start heading back to what I was initially trying to do. Still can't help but feel like I missed something, though. Next stop is Summonwater Village. As soon as I see the icon to summon, I bring out the wolves. I just know I'm going to be surrounded here. Until I find the fight with the Tibia Mariner. I suppose I could be surrounded if the Mariner itself wasn't the most effective crowd control I've had access to all game. I wail on it like it's a punching bag until it runs like a coward and I have to chase it down so I can bully it some more. On the other side of the arena is D, who marks a spot on my map that will send me to the Beast's Clergyman. I debate whether I want to bother with it for a second before deciding that I'll take the free seal it gives. But first, I need to find the hidden chest in this area. There's always one. It takes some time and a stone sword key, but I get a very useful talisman out of it. This area was on the easier side, but it was a lot of fun and it had a great reward. More like this, please. I head to the Sending Gate for the Beast Clergyman. It's actually pretty close to an area I've already been to, but I don't warp to it because I don't know where it is vertically, and down is easier than up. It doesn't matter because it's actually at the bottom. In exchange for the death root I have, the Beast Clergyman gives me an eye for finding more of it, and a claw that lets me cast incantations. I put the claw in next to my shield so I don't need to scroll through 3 weapons. A decision which I am completely sure I will not regret. I still need to put some points in Faith if I plan to use Flame Cleanse Me, but I can take care of that later. For now, I head to the beach of West Limgrave. I spent some time trying to get the invisible beetle rolling on the beach. I can't say I enjoy these. The best way to get them is to stand in place, and if you miss, wait for them to come back to you, which artificially extends the time you spend doing this. It feels like padding in a game that already feels too long, and they're still too convenient to pass up because it's passing by an essentially free Ash of War. Also on the coast is, fittingly enough, the Coastal Cave, where Bach is lying by the Grace crying in pain. Alright, time for revenge. I use the Glintstone Pebble here, trying to just get the enemies to come towards me one by one, but it's strong enough to just kill things. Works for me. The cave itself isn't interesting, but at least it's short. I decide to summon the NPC for help because this is another Horde boss. I also bring out the wolves because it's 2 bosses and a bunch of lesser enemies. but the arena is actually big enough that you only engage both bosses if you're really careless. Honestly, I feel like I became the Horde boss. The first demi-human chief died being pushed in a corner with the second, and the second didn't last too long after. Past the cave is the island with the Church of Dragon Communion. These incantations tend to run with a decent amount of arcane, so I don't plan to make use of this, but it's a nice area. I returned to Bach to give him his sewing needle back. I guess I'm going through with his questline now. That's alright. Bach is a good character and has a heartfelt quest. And he doesn't die a horrible/pointless death. I don't think he has weird transitions between the places he stays either. There's just the matter of getting the item that can give him a good ending. But more on that when it comes up. The only thing I think I need to take care of in Limgrave is the stuff in the lake, so I warp as close to it as I can, but since that means going back to the First Grace, I decide it's time for a rematch with the Knight. Let's try out that new spirit I got from the Mariner. They're not sturdy, but they respawn, so they're still effective at managing the boss's aggro. This fight goes a lot better than my first attempt did, but even the tree sentinel's tired of trees getting in the way of the fight. The skeletons give me just enough breathing room to not feel overwhelmed, so I'll probably keep using them for a bit. When I get to the lake itself, not much interesting happens until the dragon swoops down. Since the skeletons did so well in the last fight, I decided to use them here too. I like the Dragonfield bosses in concept, but despite having multiple lock-on points, usually, the camera can still be difficult. This is why I prefer Monster Hunter's camera for big fights like this. Just tap to center on the thing you're locked onto, and have free control of it otherwise. It makes working around the camera easier. I think the goal is to have the camera low to emphasize the size of what you're fighting. Too often, it just ends up giving me a view of just the legs, and that doesn't exactly scream epic fight. The fight itself is pretty simple at this point. This is essentially still the tutorial area, and I've leveled a fair bit. I try to get in the habit of jumping over most of the attacks, as that's clearly the intended way to dodge, but I'm not entirely successful. Still, it's Torrent tanking the brunt of the damage. He gets down to half health, but stays up for the fight, so no trouble there. Looking through the rest of the lake, I hit the Limgrave tunnels, and honestly, I'm already getting tired of the tunnels. It's just too much of the same aesthetic, and it can feel like it intrudes on your time in the more interesting parts of the rest of the world. I understand the desire to have something to discover in the world outside the forts and legacy dungeons, but you could have used more than the same set of assets for these. The tunnel itself is nothing special. I ended up leaning more on glintstone pebble for damage so my sword wouldn't bounce off the enemies, and I wouldn't have to waste time with them. At least until I ran out of mana. Time for the boss. The Stone Digger Troll is easy enough to fight, but is annoying because he has the same property as the enemies of the area, causing my sword to bounce off of it. I don't know why I don't use any magic to deal with this. I don't have a lot of mana, but I had more than nothing. Ah well. It's not a difficult victory, but I don't think I'm going to get any use out of the medallion I got. And we follow up one annoying section with another. This game's going to make sure you know how awful invaders are by making the first NPC invader a dual dagger bleed build with the Blood/Art of War. Hope you don't rely on your shield too much. They at least spawn in another NPC to assist you, and a good shield is still useful for their basic attack, but I'd be lying if I said I thought this was a fun fight. Honestly, I'm not sure I'd consider any of the invader fights fun. There's supposed to be a stand-in for invaders to get you used to them, or have them act in place of them for people who can't or won't play online for whatever reason, but they break the rules so that an invader can't. Of course, I don't enjoy any of the PvP elements of FromSoft's games. It's just something I have to tolerate, but I'll save that rant for another time. Back to the NPC invaders. They don't have stamina or FP to manage. Instead, they have a tick in their AI that tells them what move to make next, whether it's to attack, dodge, or wait passively to make it seem like they're waiting for you to make a move. The biggest effect that you have on deciding the AI's move is, typically, the distance that you stand from them. But in Elden Ring, healing and attacking are read by the AI and take priority. It's why there are so many heal catches, and while my mage, the delay on Glint Blade made it the single best spell I had access to, which is a bit of a problem with how long this game is. I appreciate the ability to take any equipment to the endgame. I'm less okay with all equipment being rendered irrelevant because of one item being so overwhelmingly better. And I know, I'm sure people would say the invaders aren't as smart as actual people, so the player has the advantage, but I wonder how true that actually is. We'll get into that later, as I don't actually struggle much here. I'm able to use my Art of War to keep the guy staggered until help arrives, and I can take my time lining up jump attacks. I get a little careless, but nothing a quick chug of healing juice can't fix, and the fight doesn't last too long. There's another cave after this, and nothing's really notable about it until the end where Patches ambushes me because I was trying to steal from him. Here's something I'll give Elden Ring major credit for, even if it might lose me some friends. This game is the only one I like Patches in. Patches in past games always felt too much like a DMPC that existed solely to get one over on the player. Often enough, falling for his traps is either required or unavoidable to progress. Even when they're not, having him try to kill you, then immediately trying to let bygones be bygones is annoying. If the player character had other choices besides capitulate or murder, this might be a different conversation, and I might find his cowardice endearing the way I'm supposed to. He's theoretically there to be a punishment for your greed, and here in Elden Ring at least, I think that works. We'll ignore for now how the rest of the design of Souls-like in general almost requires collecting every scrap of potential power you can get your hand on, and making meta-commentary on player behavior that you actively encourage is trite, and can discourage the kind of behavior that can make for a better experience, rather than simply being a device to make you think a bit. But in isolation, you see an empty campsite that, if it weren't for a fog wall, would seem like an empty merchant camp, and you come barging in and steal the clothes from Patch's back. The fight itself isn't hard, although I do mismanage my stamina and die the first time around. Turns out, trying to attack a tower shield repeatedly doesn't tend to be an effective strategy. Even in the second fight, I have a hard time getting momentum. I attack, and he shields. I try again, and he dodges. Eventually, I can tank an attack and start draining his health. At half health, he begs for his life, and the fight ends. With his fight out of the way, I unlock his shop, but I probably won't end up using it. Further up the channel is another set of catacombs. Nothing too interesting to see here, but I do have some fun using the floor trap to my benefit for once. The Grave Warden Duelist at the end is nothing special. I do try using the skeletal militiamen again so I can get a better grasp on their durability, and one of them is removed pretty much immediately. There's a grab, which is annoying, but it's fairly telegraphed, and it isn't an instant kill, so there's only so much I can complain. More concerning is the tracking and wide arcs of his attacks. It feels like I have to keep timing dodges to iframe through the attacks, rather than just keeping out of their damage window. Of course, I keep dodging to the left, so I may have just chosen the wrong side to start dancing around. And he's affected by backstab, so it makes sense not to make it easy to get behind him. Either way, I'm able to deal with him with at least one of my summons making it to the end. And my reward is another summon. Let's hope it ends up being useful. I feel I've explored Limgrave all I've wanted, so it's time to try opening Stormvale. And to do that, I need to beat Margit. I don't know how difficult Margit is considered in the community anymore, but I know that the pace switch between my playthroughs is taking me some getting used to, especially now that I'm dealing with the first real boss of the game. My first attempt goes really well until I lose my rhythm and start taking a lot of damage from his heal punishes and his roll catches. His dagger swipe is too fast for me to dodge it properly, and will come out during what should be my chance to attack, since there is no distinction between an attack with a dagger swipe follow-up and one that is an actual opportunity to make progress on the boss. Also, calling them delayed attacks here may be deceptive when each attack is probably two separate animations. One to prepare the attack and one to actually do the attack. That doesn't make the unreactable window of the actual attack, or the way the delay messes with the pace of combat any better. Besides, look at this. This looks ridiculous. At least for this attack, I get some insight from this for dodging it fairly effectively. The skeletal ashes aren't pulling their weight, and the extended combos in the second phase are still giving me trouble. So I decide to switch my summon for better support. I pull out the jellyfish, who is a poison-spewing tank, and I have a noticeable improvement in performance. The actual damage output is low, but the poison more than makes up for it, and still draws enough aggro to keep me safe, and even gives me time for a few jump attacks. The first attempt with the summon goes well until Margit is at half health, and then I just don't have room to breathe. I don't have stamina to keep dodging, and when I back off, I panic heal, which this game harshly punishes. The next round I spend more time behind my shield. I still dodge where I can, but a stance break for a shield right now is less punishing than being caught by a roll catch. I get caught by a delayed attack, because of course I do, but I survive with barely a sliver of health. My summon catches aggro letting me heal, but is slain before I get back in the fight. I go for a finishing attack, but no, I don't do quite enough damage, and Margit puts a football field of distance between us. I worry that this is where things go wrong. One of those moments where I lose right at the end, and I'm going to have to spend another hour just to get close to where I was. But, no. Even from beyond the grave, my summon seals the win. MVP, Aurelia the Jellyfish. This area has been smoother to play now that all the tutorial stuff is out of the way. It has its moments that are annoying, but since I'm essentially back in the starting area, none of it is difficult to deal with. Margit wasn't awful, but I wish I could have ignored him until now, since I knew I wouldn't want to try taking him on early. But he's out of the way now. Next up, Stormvale Castle. Thanks again for watching my video. What did you think of the fight with Margit? Did you try to fight him immediately, or go somewhere else first? Remember to subscribe to be updated when I release a new video. If you want to support the making of these videos and other video game critiques, check out my Patreon. All videos are posted ad-free to the Patreon, and $10 patrons will get a shout out at the end of the next video. See you all next time.